We're going to go on to story number 2. Sean Gruss, we're going to go to you with story number 2. This piece is coming out of the Miami Herald. And for the record, I'm quoted in the story. That's not why I picked the story. I'm not going to comment on the story. You guys can sort of kick it around if you want. But, I picked the story because it just came out. There's been a tremendous reaction to it. It has to do with a lot of things that are going on in South Florida right now. One is the insurance crisis. Another thing has to do with the lack of housing, affordability, a variety of different things. So this is, I think, an issue that's going to really sort of pop up in 2024. So I'll read the first couple graphs and then, John, and then I'll ask you to go ahead and comment. Here we go. Again, Miami Herald headline: Are condo buyouts rising in Miami? What owners should know as developers make moves. And here's the first couple graphs. Developers are hungry for prime real estate and are approaching condo owners of aging buildings, many on the waterfront, to persuade them to sell. It's a tough decision for owners and maybe even the start of a standoff. Miami Herald spoke with 3 real estate pros to share advice for owners contemplating condo buyouts or terminations, with at least 80% of residents in a building agree to sell to a developer. Story goes on to talk about some of the issues that are playing out, talking about how you can actually do what's called a termination or a buyout, where a developer will come in, buy out all the units. Once all the units are purchased, notify the state. The state will then basically terminate or cancel the condominium. The folio numbers will all revert back to 1, and then a developer is able to take the property, knock it down, and build something brand new on it. So effectively recycle rather than have to lay down new infrastructure, roads, sewers, things like that. So, John, why don't you take the story, and then if anybody else wants to chime in, please feel free to do so. And I'm going to be mum because I'm quoted in it. And let it rip. I have a thick skin. You want to rip me a new one, please do so.
Well, I think if you're in an older condo building, I mean, you've got to assume that it's a target for a buyout. I mean, especially with the rising cost of insurance, the new legislation that just passed requiring condos to set up reserves and conduct engineering surveys and rehab older buildings, which a lot of them have had deferred maintenance, and special assessments are coming. Big special assessments are coming. A lot of people can't afford those. So, I mean, certainly if you're in an older condo building, 20, 30, 40 years old, I mean, you can pretty much assume that developers have eyeballed it at least. I mean, I hear this anecdotally from friends who own a condo. I have a friend who owns a condo in one of the low-rise buildings that's been around for 30, 40 years on Brickell Bay Drive right here in Miami. And, developers are snapping up units sort of on the sly. They're not announcing their intentions because they don't want to be, they don't want to overpay. And so they're lowballing some offers, and they're acquiring condos here and there, and pretty much, until they get a certain amount of condos in the building, and then they sort of launch an assault and for the rest of the units. So, I mean, there's definitely some activity going on. Some of it is like sort of a little bit underhanded and behind the scenes. And then, of course, the condo associations are run by people who also stand to benefit. So, we've been talking about HOAs that are being mismanaged. And I think some of the HOA boards are, would be happy to be compensated for assisting developers and decertifying a condo building and perhaps getting rewarded. So I think there's some of that going on. There's if you own a condo in any of these older buildings, I would definitely be be on alert. And who knows, in this market, you might actually make out pretty well. This isn't the Great Recession where everybody was losing their shirts and condo vultures were buying for buying units for $125 a square foot. So now you could probably expect a better price, but you just you need to watch it and hold out for top dollars.
Mr. Fakler, Mr. Seemuth, Any opinion about condo buyouts? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it actually a necessity due to all the added costs that owners in older buildings, which tend to be antiquated? And generally speaking, when I look at a building, just to say what it's antiquated, typically it has a surface parking lot. If you see cars parked around a building, that means it's older. It hasn't been maximized. Because a lot of the newer buildings, the real estate is simply too expensive. So therefore, you build a pedestal, you have a parking garage, and the units go on top. So, is this a necessity for maybe some of these older buildings as a result of the disaster that occurred in Surfside, where nearly 100 people died and $1 billion was paid out? The federal government is studying what caused that, and it actually put a lot of insurance companies at the brink because of the payouts that were necessary.
I'd say get the hell out while you can if you're in one of these older buildings. That's all I can say.
Mr. Fakler, you lived in an older building. You were up in
yeah.
West Broward County. Can you talk a little bit about the dynamics of living in one of these buildings? How big was the building, and what was it like with your neighbors? And was everybody cordial? And if they need to spend extra money, put money in reserves in order to meet the new state laws, would they have done that openly and willingly? And would they have had a smile on their face?
Well, the high rise that I lived in was actually east in Broward and Pompano Beach, and that was actually before any of this happened. So I really can't comment on the current situation of HOAs and high rises. So I never really, that was going back in the 90s. So
what
can't
about
really
when you
comment.
lived in Western Broward County, Davie?
Yeah, Davie, that's right. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, the one in Davie was a 55 and over at the time, and there were a lot of issues. This was post the hurricane, post Andrew, but we had a lot of problems with flooding from other storms, and in fact, after I sold mine, I actually made a good profit on mine. But the poor guy who bought my place, the roof was the top floor, and the roof caved in from a storm. And the blue top was up there for years. So I don't know what the hell happened with the poor guy. But, I walked out with 100% profit on it,
And Mr. Fakler, you obviously disclosed everything on the way out, right?
Well, I mean, listen, I didn't know what did I know? I didn't know that the roof was, going to cave in on the guy. I mean, it was, from a storm. Actually, it was probably from one of the hurricanes that happened at that point. And I think this was around 2005. 2004. I think we had a series of bad hurricanes. So that poor guy bought at the wrong time, obviously. And I guess everything is about timing.
Mike, would you like to add anything?
Just that a lot of I understand Jean's point that some of this is kind of going on behind the scenes, and there's probably some funky deals being worked out with HOAs in the process. But I do believe I agree that if you can get out, it's a good idea, because some of these older properties, and I don't think everybody's getting screwed in the process. For example, I lived in, I forget the name of it, but it's just west of Biscayne on 19th Street, 19th and Bayshore.
Yep.
And that's being redeveloped, and the developer is paying, I believe, $1.9 million per unit. And when I lived there, 20 some years ago, nothing, the building was selling for anywhere close to that. Now things have changed a lot since then too, but I think it's a gift from heaven for a lot of people.
Wow, there we go. We got some good news. Everybody says that I'm negative. That's some good news. Gift from heaven. A gift from heaven. Love it, love it, love it.